Good evening and welcome to the Long Meadow Select Board meeting for February 4th, 2019. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At tonight's meeting, we have a couple of hearings. One is a liquor license application for Extra Anchovies or Posto. That's the restaurant that's going into the location of the former Bertucci's. There's also a petition from Verizon for some work on Fairfield Terrace, and we'll get to them about 7:45. We're also going to do a little bit of more review on our Charter Review Committee actions and proposals, and also talk about a little bit about our Town Manager's Capital Report. It is also the time for our quarterly capital plan, quarterly investment report, which we will do, and at some point we will probably go into executive session to discuss contract proposals with non-union employees, but that's all to come yet this evening, so it's a full evening. At this point, I'll ask if there's any, if anybody has any announcements at all. I have a couple, but hearing no other, the only one I have is just to remind residents that applications for the school committee vacancies, there are 4 vacancies on the school committee that will come open on September 25th, are due on Thursday at noon on February 21st. Those applications can be taken out at the select board and town clerk's offices. There's also obviously petitions for the election that's coming up in June that are now available at the town clerk's offices. Okay. Are there any residents' comments? Seeing no residents' comments, ask if there are any select board comments. Richard?
Yeah, I do. People who watched last meeting saw me recuse myself from voting on the select board. It wasn't the people. I was recusing myself because I disagreed with the format that we were using and the procedures that were underway. But during the last 2 meetings we had with the school committee, we had constant reinforcement of the word transparency, fairness, openness on the selection process, in which I really do agree with totally. When we got into the process of bringing the people forth, I think people ought to understand we didn't have any information in front of us other than what was told to us at that table. There was information available, but we didn't have it. It was, I think Debbie had some applications, et cetera, and resumes, which would have given us a lot more information on the individual applicants. The long and short of the statement is that there was a person that was nominated by the school committee, I think Ms. Bell, and subsequently was placed on the committee. Ms. Bell was very truthful in her analysis she gave us of her profession, but she wasn't transparent in the fact that she did not reveal a lot of pertinent things about what she currently is doing now. I don't know why she didn't reveal them, but it's very obvious when I looked at her resume that there was a lot of information left off, which I clearly would have thought would have been put out in the open since it was concerning educational methods. Apparently she was the superintendent Windsor school system that resigned her position to take a position with a educational consortium as a pretty high-level position after they had implemented the systems at her school system under her as the superintendent down in Windsor. A note put out by her school, which I read later, said in July, Bell was leaving the district going to Master Street Transcript Consortium as a director of member schools engagement. The consortium is building a new transcript that, rather than a course of credit, calls for demonstrated mastery of skills, knowledge, and habits of the mind by presenting evidence that is then assessed against institutionally specific standards. Bell has served as an advisor to the Master Transcript Consortium since inception and looks forward to supporting the Windsor Lock SD school system in a different way. The district may be one of the many early pilot sites. My only problem, and I will admit, I did not vote, but it wasn't for that fact, but I've got this information later, but I would like to, I'd like to reach out and say that I do believe in transparency, honesty, and fairness across the board, but I don't think it was displayed in the interviewing process in this room. I find it inconceivable that somebody could have left a position in July especially a superintendency, and moved on to a consortium, educational consortium, and not have displayed that information here in the room to the people that were voting, because that was all of the information we had on these applicants. So I'm dissatisfied. I'm unhappy, but it is what it is. I just thought I would share my feelings with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any other comments? I have two comments. One is that in our packet today, we received, and it's under correspondence, so it generally wouldn't get spoken about tonight, a letter from Melanson Heath, who is our town auditor. It's a follow-up to the audit for the fiscal year 2018, which concluded, I think, in October, November, Paul, something like that. And it was a clean letter of recommendation. And when we had an audit review a month or so ago, we said that letter was yet to be delivered. So I thought it was important to announce to folks in town that we did get a letter. It was a clean letter of recommendation from Melanson Heath. And with that, I think our audit is closed. The other comment I'll make is that as we're looking forward to potential next meetings and agenda items, the next meeting of the select board that might be scheduled for February 18th, because that's a holiday, that's President's Day, it would normally be scheduled for the 19th. We're going to look in the next week at our agenda. It looks a little light. We may, in fact, postpone that meeting, so I thought people should know that the 19th may not be held, but we're not off the hook. We do have a meeting scheduled for the 25th of February, which will be at least the first day, perhaps the last day, but of interviews for school committee candidates. So I think the people in the select board should make sure they have the 25th on their agenda and know that right now the 19th of February looks a little, that's maybe light enough that we can push that meeting off. Okay, with that being said, just move ahead, see if there are any other meetings. Stephen, we're going to move to the town manager's report, recognizing that we have a 7:15 time to break for our liquor license hearing.
Very briefly, the soil transporting is actually going very well. I went out there today, and the pile is significantly smaller, and they've been doing a lot of what they call stripping, where the layer of soil that needs to be also removed that was not yet piled up. They've been working on that. The favorable turn in the weather this week has really helped speed things up. Like I said, the process has gone very smoothly. DEP has been pleased with it. So hopefully next couple of weeks they'll be all done with the soil moving. Then there's additional capping work and things that we're working on, getting pricing for, looking ahead towards town meeting when we'll potentially need to fund the entire capping. So I have a few notes about the ongoing projects. Unfortunately, some of the stuff that we are relying on town council for has taken a backseat to the issues we've been dealing with the school committee vacancy. So as soon as we're kind of through the woods on that, which I think we're close, we'll get back to the kind of regular business. And I did note in the street lights, and in fact I just got the email this afternoon that the MAPC does have a program where they will reimburse a certain percentage of the cost to purchase and install street lights, LED street lights. So I'm working with MAPC and Agawam and West Springfield on pursuing that program. Yeah, I think it's due in a couple of weeks, so we'll have a report on that at the next meeting. And after I submitted the written report, I was asked by the school district to go to the school committee meeting tomorrow night and just give a status update on the search for a consultant for superintendent. As you recall, we did issue an RFP. I will share with the board that what I intend to tell the school committee tomorrow night is, setting aside the resignations, I did have concerns about the quality of the search. We sent it to 14 firms. We only got one response. There were some issues raised by a resident highlighting some things that were said publicly before we really got into the formalized process of that. I don't know if you remember Chad Thompson, our procurement director, went to the school committee and explained how all of that works. I think before the school committee at the time was fully aware of that process, they had made some suggestions about how they could proceed. That may have had an impact on the number of responses. Just to give you a perspective, in 2016, we received 4 proposals for the same, essentially the same scope of work. So had things kept moving forward, when I never actually got a first meeting with the selection committee. I was going to suggest that maybe we try and look at potentially a different way forward, because when you procure services and you don't get a great response, I think it's important to analyze what's the reasoning behind that, and are you better off either going back out or, like I said, trying to find a different way forward. So I'm going to just relay that information just like I did to you to the school committee, just so they have it for their information.
Paul?
Just very quickly on the FY20 budget. Back in October, I gave budget assumptions that had us in a deficit of about $670,000. Budget requests came in much higher than my assumptions were, and it shot up the projected deficit at that point in time to well over $1 million. The good news is that the governor's budget that was proposed at the end of January had extra money or more money proposed coming in from the state than I had originally projected, about $225,000 more. Coupled with that, our assessment from the Hampden County Regional Retirement System came in. That was also less than I had projected. So there's been a couple of things that have worked in our favor. Stephen and I are meeting later on this week. The budget projected deficit has dropped dramatically. And I have some recommendations for Stephen and I will go over on, I think, Thursday afternoon we meet. And it might all work out in the end once again.
In the end, it will work out. It's just a matter of how it works out, Paul.
It all depends on who's favored.
Right, okay. Stephen, I just have a question. Can you just go into a little bit of more depth that MAPC reimbursement or what you know about it for the streetlights? I was just curious about that.
And could you tell us what MAPC is?
Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. I'll do you one better. I'll forward you the.
It's the
Okay.
PVPC for Boston.
For Boston, okay.
Given that we have a hearing starting in a couple minutes, I'll just forward you the email with the flyer, with the form. It explains the program. So I'll do that, and then I'll just briefly describe it. So the grant applies to corporate streetlights and only and funds a percentage of material and labor costs subtracted the utility incentives. So 30% of the material and labor costs for LEDs, 15% of material and labor costs for wireless or smart controls, and you need to have an audit as a prerequisite, which we will. And that's about all I know about it for right now. But then the sign-up window is till February 15th, and you have to complete the retrofit no later than May 29th, 2020.
So we're going to chase that down, I assume.
Yeah. While we were warming up here before the meeting, I just emailed them back and asked if the 3 towns can apply for that as a group, or do we have to apply individually? And so when I hear back from them, we'll know we're either going to do it individually or go all in together.
Okay. Reed, you have a question?
Yeah, on the, you mentioned the draft EIR. You said you were still waiting to hear what our options were in regards to the pigging station. And are we going to make comments by the 9th, or
I've been
what is your
looking at the
recommendation?
draft EIR,
Mhm.
and most of it deals with the Agawam work. There's
Mhm.
very little of it. I don't know if anybody saw, but I mean, it's a big giant document. But I have not been able to find. I've been flipping through the thing, and I can't really find anything that specifically references the work in Long Meadow. And so I don't really know what we're supposed to be commenting on, because it's mostly the Agawam compression station and a pipeline loop. I did have I did not, but I did make a few phone calls to get some information, and get some, let's say, legal or consulting advice, and I think made some positive ground on that. I guess my gut is we should probably have an executive session to talk about that in more detail. Not that there's much to report right now.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to take a break. If anybody else has any questions, I'd like to entertain a motion to open the liquor license hearing that was scheduled for 7:15.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Vote is unanimous to open the liquor license hearing. If a couple of people could come forward, you can all come forward, grab an extra seat, and just make a comment for the folks who haven't been here before. These microphones, as you can tell, don't amplify. They're for the cable TV, so you do need to use the microphone so the people at home can hear you. And if you just take a moment, introduce yourselves, and state a little bit about what it is you're planning to do, and see if there are any questions.
Okay, I'm Attorney Chris Brown. I'm from 1252 Elm Street in West Springfield, This is Ralph Santinello, and behind us is Steve Walker. He's a representative of the owner of the Long Meadow Shops, and seated to his left is Christina Presnell. Christina is Mr. Santinello's sister, and so as you know, they're proposing the entity known as Extra Anchovies LLC, doing business as Posto, is proposing to open a Italian restaurant in the old Bertucci's location in the Long Meadow Shops, right here, just for a short distance from here. And Mr. Santinello owns this business with his brother-in-law, who is Christina's husband. His name is Mike Presnell. He's working tonight in one of their other restaurants. They're both from East Long Meadow. I've lived there a long time, so you'll have local ownership, people who are committed to the community, to this area, western Massachusetts. Mr. Santinello and Mr. Presnell are the owners of the Federal in Agawam, which I hope you're all familiar with. It's a great restaurant, and they also are the owner of, and they've owned that the Federal for 17 years as their on-site restaurant there. There's also a catering restaurant associated with it, where they tell me that a lot of their customers are residents of Long Meadow. And they also have owned for 6 years Vinted Wine Bar in West Hartford, and I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to get down there, and it's a wonderful place. Those are both very upscale restaurants. They've never had any kind of issue with any license or disciplinary problems in either of those facilities. Christina Presnell is the proposed manager of record. She and her brother, Ralph Santinello, grew up basically in the restaurant business. Their family, their parents owned a restaurant in Holyoke for many years called Amadeo's, and Christina and Ralph basically grew up in that business. And Christina has been the manager. She's worked at the Federal for 17 years. She's currently the front end manager. Has been doing that for many years. She is very experienced, and for those of you who know what front end means, it means everything that goes on outside the kitchen. It's basically the food and alcohol service. She's in charge of the bar and food operations. She is TIPS certified herself, and she understands that she'll be responsible for, if you approve her as the manager of record, she will be responsible for assuring compliance with the liquor laws and regulations for Massachusetts and Long Meadow. So she's very experienced, and they understand that you will require everybody to be TIPS certified, and they in their other facilities, everybody is, and they will be doing that here too. Anybody who will be handling liquor will be TIPS certified. They plan on bringing in Williams Distributing to do an on-site training for all employees, and they will continue, training anybody new who comes on board. I don't know if you want to see the menu or not, but it's I have a copy of it. Unfortunately, didn't bring me samples or anything, but it's not quite as upscale as the Federal. That's not quite as planned. It's going to be more family-oriented, where you would feel comfortable bringing your children there, or after a sporting event, or coming on a date. It's going to be a very nice restaurant. It's a family-oriented restaurant, and will be very consistent with the character of the other restaurants in this area and with the town of Long Meadow. This, as you know, was previously Bertucci's, so there's a long history of this site having been both a restaurant and having had a liquor license there. This is going to be a restaurant. It's not a bar. There won't be any dance floor. Their proposed hours of operation, and make sure I have this correct, Ralph, is Monday through Thursday, 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday until 11 p.m., and then closing Sunday at 9 p.m. There's a floor plan in the package that has been submitted, and I believe there's 150 seats. It's a little over 4,000 square feet, basically the same size as Bertucci's, the only difference being that they are proposing as small, I think 20-seat outdoor patio. Then they understand it has to comply with all the as proposed. If you have any questions, Mr. Walker can answer that, but they understand what the requirements are of the ABCC to have any kind of outdoor seating, and this will be fully compliant with that. And assuming, hopefully if you approve this will be, they understand there'll be an on-site inspection by the ABCC. I think this business, as proposed, is going to be a great addition to the town of Long Meadow, and something that the town and its residents can be proud of. And as I said, it'll be consistent with this type of restaurant, consistent with what's already in this neighborhood, and with what the residents of the town of Long Meadow would want. So, and if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Fine. Thank you very much. Mr. Santnell, do you have any comments? You okay with?
No, you did a great job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I can read well.
Yeah.
Open this up for any questions from members of the select board. Marie?
So you're taking down the gazebo?
The gazebo's gone, yes.
Oh, it's already gone.
Yes.
I don't think that was his decision.
No, that was,
Okay.
yeah.
Tried to give it away.
Actually, we're going to try and give it away. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
To the town.
Yeah, they made the offer. We had nothing to do. We had nothing for it.
I was supposed to put it on Craigslist that didn't get taken. We had a shed in our backyard. My wife put it on Craigslist within an hour. It was gone.
I guess I have a couple of questions, and the notice we've gotten that comes along with this, we got it from our administrative assistant, who really does our liquor license certifications, Debbie House. She indicated that there's still a few items not yet completed: the building fire certificate of inspection, liquor liability insurance certificate of insurance, workers' compensation affidavit and certificate of insurance, and then the tip safe serve employee certification. I understand you may not have hired employees yet, so
Yeah, we don't have-
that may be a little bit more difficult. But we went through this previously with a prior applicant who came in with what I'd consider to be a not yet complete application, and their argument was, before we make any investment, we want to make sure we could get a liquor license. In your case, it sounds like you've already made the investment, and so I guess the question is, why are we here tonight prior to having these other items approved on our list?
We haven't made any investment yet. Any of the work that's been done has been done by the landlord. We won't make any investment until we get the liquor license, because obviously it would be,
Right.
if we don't get it, there is no business. So-
Their purchase of the license and the lease are subject to approval of the license by this board. But that's a very good question, and I'm not to make an excuse. I'm covering tonight for Attorney Frank Caruso, who is actually normally does these hearings, but he teaches up at UMass, and he was teaching tonight. But I'm prepared to answer any questions. I did notice that in the requirements, and I think the best answer to that is that, if you're going out to buy a car, you understand before you register the car, you have to have an insurance, but you don't go out and buy the insurance before you actually go out and looking for the car. Clearly, they understand that before any license can be approved and issued to them, they have to have all those things in place. They clearly understand that. They've owned they have this same requirement at the federal, and I'm not sure what the requirements are in Connecticut, but clearly for the federal, they have to have liability insurance and workers' comp insurance, unemployment set up, and all those kind of things. Clearly, that will be done, and so and they understand that. But I know if you want to buy liquor liability insurance, which is very expensive, you want to put it in place now, they're going to be paying, they don't plan on opening until May, or maybe April possibly, but
June,
certainly
May
May
or June.
or June. So they'd be paying for 5 or 6 months of insurance for things that they don't need. They don't have any employees, so workers' comp insurance, again, would be clearly, they'd be throwing good money after bad. And while I'm sure they'd love to keep the economy going, but I think that's money that we'd be better off putting into the business itself once it's up and running. But
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, he was right. We did bring up that question before, and we did get clarification on it, and I don't think we were aware of it at that time, that our clerk told us that she will hold the license until all the checks are done. And apparently, she's the final custodian on the release of that license. And as I say, Mark was right. We had never had that before, but we found out with a little bit of communication that it was okay. It was more of a standard practice than we'd been led to believe in our sweet little community. So,
yeah, I think if they were opening up next week, that'd be a different issue. But
yeah.
with
And in
5 or
case you
6
have
months
noticed, he's got the black hat on tonight, and I got the white hat on.
All right. Can you just repeat the hours of operation?
Certainly.
I got Monday through Thursday to 10 PM and Friday and Saturday, I think it was at 11, but what was it?
Sunday until 9.
Till 9 PM, okay, that's what I thought, okay. And is that your expectation that you'll have a liquor license that would operate until those hours?
Yes.
Well, that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, we just, our liquor licenses can be hour specific, and so we
Right.
want to make sure that they meet the requirements of their hours. Does anybody have, Tom?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you have quite a pedigree in the restaurant business. I mean, it
It's the
sounds
only
like.
thing I do know how to do.
Yeah, that's
The only
right.
thing I'm good at.
Now, how many folks will you be employing in your restaurant, you think?
Well, that's a great question, but I would guess that with a place that size, we're looking at somewhere between 30 and 40, something like that. You know, full and part-time employees.
Great. Well, good. Well, hopefully we have some people from town who will want to work there.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, and, all right, that's about it. I don't know if anyone else
Bill,
has
any
any-
questions?
Well, no, it's the same thing we went through before. You can't expect you're not gonna have inspections, fire inspection and health inspection. You don't have anything to inspect. So we'd basically be approving the license, and then it'll be issued when all those things are
Right.
completed.
Certainly, yeah, no, they understand that. I mean, I'm on the Conservation Commission in Wilbraham, and we understand that, and when we issue orders of conditions, it says that, you're expected to do, obtain any other permits or licenses that are required to, we just deal with that one issue. When he certainly understands he will not get that physical license until all those other things are done, and, the landlord is responsible for doing all the build-out, so those other issues will fall in line as soon as those are done. And, he understands that you have to have that inspection, that safety inspection. And so,
Rich?
Doesn't have anything to do with the liquor license. I had a question with your restaurant. Will you be doing original recipes, or will it be repackaging of available products?
Oh, no, it's gonna be all, we're gonna make the pasta on site,
Okay.
pizza on site, everything's gonna be from scratch.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
No charge for the advertising.
No charge for that.
speaking to the camera.
That's right. We look forward to opening in June. Everybody caught that.
If there are no other questions, I'll entertain a
So
motion to
moved.
close the hearing.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Foster, seconded by Mr. Lowe. All those in favor of closing the hearing? Aye. Excuse me, the motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to, on the question at hand of the granting a liquor license?
So moved.
Second.
I'm going to declare those out of order because the motion needs to have a contingency to it, and that didn't. So we have to make the motion contingent upon approving a liquor license, contingent upon passing all the areas of the liquor license application that aren't yet complete. So if you want to make that motion.
I don't think that's what we usually
Yeah, I
do.
think
We
we're just-
usually
Sure we do.
approve the
We make-
license. which is-
Contingent
It won't be
upon them
released.
complete?
Delivery contingent.
It's
Delivery, with the delivery contingent?
Delivery,
Yeah.
okay, so
Right, I mean,
approval of the
not-
liquor license with the contingency that it won't be released until all of the requirements are fulfilled.
Second.
Okay. Motion's made by, thank you, Tom, made by Mr. Cusa and seconded by Mr. Foster.
Told you I had the white hat on.
I just want to get this right. Is there any discussions on the topic? I just have
I'm sorry, just before you vote, I just had to make sure I turn in the green
Yeah,
cards.
if you give them to
and the check.
Mr. Crane, he'll get them to the right place. I don't have a comment on this at all, other than I think it behooves us to tell the applicants that the town of Longmeadow takes their liquor licenses seriously. If you haven't caught on to it before, we do compliance checks, usually at minimum twice a year. Your establishment is probably about as close to our high school as you can get, and that concerns a bunch of us. And so I welcome you to the town of Longmeadow. I think it'll be a great asset for the town, but I do want to ask that you please comply with all of our laws regarding underage drinking and compliance with that. And, we're in the trust but verify kind of application, so we'll be around to see you after you open. So that'd be my comments. And with that, if there's no other comment, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? The vote passes 5-0. Folks, thanks very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with your new
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
enterprise.
45 of the 50, we need to mail 50.
Go ahead, Marie.
Hopefully they'll come back.
Sure, go ahead.
more of a.
Great, thank you.
Paul, I have a question on our meals tax. Are we at the maximum? The meals tax?
When you say maximum,
Is there allowable amount that we're allowed
yeah,
to?
as far as we're assessing,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And what is it? Is it half a percent?
0.25%.
0.25, and that's by statute.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions for Stephen and the town manager's report? We have a Verizon hearing, but it's not for 15 minutes, and just in case some abutters and others show up, we're going to defer that, opening that hearing until the time is upon us. I'm just going to move to old business and ask for a motion to approve the minutes of January 22nd.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of January 22nd.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Lukusa and seconded by Mr. Foster. Any questions, concerns, comments, corrections? All those in favor? The vote is 5-0. Oh, the vote is 4-0 with Mr. Lowe abstaining. He wasn't present. Okay. And because the next item on our agenda may go a little longer, I'm just going to skip to a update on the school committee process, just so everybody at home can hear that. So for people who weren't around or haven't been reading the papers, last Thursday?
Thursday.
Oh, yeah, last Thursday, there was a meeting, as Mr. Foster noted, that we appointed a fourth member of the school committee. That fourth member was sufficient to bring the school committee up to a quorum. The school committee is scheduled to meet tomorrow night in this room, which is the Long Meadow High School meeting room, and we'll be operating the school committee as normal. In the interim between now and February 21st, people can nominate themselves by just indicating their interest at the town clerk's office for being considered for one of the 4 positions in the school committee that will come open. And so on February 25th, we will conduct interviews jointly between the select board and the school committee, and no sooner than 7 days following that, we will make appointments of all 4 members or up to 4 members. I guess we don't have to appoint all 4. We'll make appointments up to 4 members of the school committee. Those appointments, those people appointed, will serve through the June 11th town election. So if anybody is also interested, there is now going to be 5 openings on the school committee up for election on June 11th. 3 of those positions openings will be for a 1-year term, and 2 of those positions or openings will be for a 3-year term. And you do have to declare which one you're voting for. I believe you can only which one you're going to be running for. I believe you can only run for either the 1 or the 3-year seat. You cannot run for both. So the school committee, as I said, is back up and operating effective last Friday morning when Susan Bell was sworn in as our 4th school committee member, and they will be meeting here tomorrow night. And I want to thank the members of the select board and the school committee who put up with a lot of uncertainty and discussions about the position that we filled and how the process by which we filled the position. I want to give a particular thanks to our town council who helped guide us through that system. So with that, I'm just going to move on, and Richard, see if you want to begin a discussion about the.
It'd be likely better if we could hold. I mean, I can start.
Well,
You got anything else we
Mark,
can
you
do,
can do
Mark?
the quarterly investment report.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's great. Why don't we do the quarterly investment report? We can ask folks, get,
Hi,
come
I'm
on.
Amy Nelson. I'm the Assistant Treasurer Collector, and I'm just going to go over the quarterly investment report for the period ending December 31st. The town held no long-term investments that exceeded the 5-year limit, and all bank balances were under $5 million, with the exception of East Boston Savings and Newburyport Savings. These accounts hold bond proceeds and are allowed $8 million. All the banks received green safety ratings from Vera Bank, and all the accounts are fully insured and secured. In December, 1,559,206 of the OPEB funds were transferred to the State Retiree Benefits Trust Fund. Our investment income shows a loss of $41,988 due to the timing of the stock market correction in December. There's one remaining OPEB CD with Belmont Savings that's going to mature on February 20th for $406,958, and that's also going to be transferred into the State Retiree Benefits Trust Fund, along with the FY19 budgeted amount of $481,000. Two 12-month stabilization CDs matured in October. One was at Country Bank with a rate of 1.5, and the second was at Adams Bank with a rate of 1.3. And these two were combined into a 12-month CD at Country Bank with a rate of 2.75%. Some banks increased their interest rates this quarter. People's Bank went from 1.84 to 2.19. East Boston went from 2.01 to 2.3. MMDT went from 2.22 to 2.46. And we're looking at alternative banking options for accounts that are earning less than 0.5%. The interest on bond proceeds will be allocated into the general fund and the water sewer funds. The quarter ended with $83,350 being earned on all bond proceeds. There also was a net decrease of $989,405 in the cash and investments for the quarter, and it was a result of timing. The warrants for the accounts payable and payroll were issued before the commitments to collect the tax bills. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Paul, I have a quick question. We've already bonded for the DPW. We borrowed that money. We obviously haven't spent much of it yet. So is our interest income now running above budget? I mean, are we-
I do not budget for interest on bond proceeds. So to answer your question, it would be definitely yes, since there is really no budget.
There's no
for it.
budget for it.
Right. I think the amount reported on here is, of those proceeds, we earned about $83,000 through December. I know through January, we're up to almost $100,000 on those proceeds, but there really was no budget for it.
Yes, and that all theoretically becomes free cash at the end of this fiscal year.
That is correct.
There's no budget for it.
That is correct.
Tom?
Question. Yeah, Paul, there's a document, the pension reserves and investment management boards gave
Yep.
us, and it has 3 columns, and all the numbers look identical to me, so I was not quite sure.
They are identical because we did it at the last month of the year. So you have the monthly, then you have like a year-to-date,
Yeah.
and then probably a quarter-to-date fiscally.
Yeah,
You have a monthly, you have a
From the
6-month.
6 month.
And then you have a year. So because we were in the last month of the year, they're all the same.
Okay.
They will certainly change as we move forward. And again, with regard to the stock market, again, December was the horrendous month for the stock market. I haven't seen a January report, but I imagine most of that money was already made back by the trust fund.
All right, because this document, I mean, this is really kind of, it doesn't tell me anything. It would be nice if it really was breaking at like half, the first 6 months of the year compared to the second half of the year.
Well, again, because we were in the last month of the year, we started the investment, you'll start seeing that as we move forward.
Right. Okay.
And again, it doesn't say anything, but it does say we lost money. It's the way I read it, unfortunately.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions for me? Richard?
Yeah, I had one question. How much money do we have sitting at 1.5%?
There are a number of accounts, there are small accounts, and I think that number is in there. Roughly, maybe about $250,000.
Okay.
They are mostly there for purposes of ease of making deposits within the school department, whether it's for school lunch, whether it's for gate receipts or student activities.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that we're concentrating on. Not necessarily changing banks, but going to the bank and saying, can you do something better on this account? Because, I personally believe that they can just give us a different type of account without changing banking arrangements, would earn a higher rate of interest. So
Right.
that's what the Treasurer Collector's Office is looking at this point in time.
So it's incidental to our total budget.
Exactly. Again, the numbers are there, and they're, again, roughly about $250,000 at this point in time.
Okay.
And the majority of that is in the school lunch program. But again, a lot of that is for ease of making, because the school department makes a deposit directly into the bank instead of transferring back over to town hall and then back to the bank. It's one of the local banks that we have ease with.
Okay.
We talk about some investment policies here. Are there any we should be reviewing or any recommendations that you have on where our policies are?
There's none at this point in time that I can think of. Our biggest one, when the investment policy was written a number of years ago, the biggest one that we did change was changing the amount we could have in one bank from that $5 million to the $8 million. That's when we were just doing the high school. And we probably, at that point in time, had lost, unfortunately, tens of thousands of dollars because we kept on having to go to different banks that were getting lower interest rate as we had to spread around the money. I don't think we'll ever see that type of cash on hand for us. Again, at the time, we had bonded, I think we probably had both bonds in place, and something else had come through with a large influx of cash that we had simultaneously. But again, we were just overloaded with cash, and we kept on going to different banks. And so that was the biggest thing. I think changing that to the $8 million helped us a lot. Continues to be, I don't say profitable, but continues to be up to our advantage. So other than that, I can't think of anything. I don't know if Amy, if you can think of anything. Again, it is conservative, but it probably makes the Treasurer Collector's Office life easier, so they're not worried about, unfortunately, what happened with the state retiree money. Certainly, we have not lost any money, except with this one occasion, because we've gone into the market. So it's very conservative, but at the same time, we have no potential loss of principal.
Should we consider a policy on bond proceeds, on what we do with them? Should we be looking to possibly place that into OPEB or put that towards cushioning our health insurance hits that come?
You could look at it. I would probably say it could be used to either, one, reduce the tax rate, because the majority of this money is coming through on debt exclusions. So we've already added something to the tax rate, or potentially put it into the capital expenditure numbers that we use annually.
So if we put it, because again, this is a whole year process. We set our rates in November. And so if we get bond proceeds during the year, then we would be setting the rates lower for the following year. Is that correct?
Setting which rate are you referring to?
I'm talking about tax rates. So if we're going to put it towards decreasing the
Right.
tax rate.
The money that we would receive in FY19 would go to offset FY20.
Okay. And right now, we do not have any policies of money automatically going towards decreasing the tax rate.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'd be interested in us, maybe in the future, meeting, actually considering a policy.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much, Amy, appreciate it. 7:45, and it's time for our Verizon petition number IA3DP4E. It's a replacement of a tree that's holding up a pole on Fairview Terrace, with a pole to hold up a pole on Fairview Terrace, I believe. I'll entertain a motion to open the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion's made by Mr. Lowe and seconded by Mr. Foster. All those in favor? Vote is 5-0. Welcome, sir. If you could just identify yourself and let us know a little bit about this.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Reisinger. I'm here as a representative of Verizon. Verizon New England and NStar Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, request permission to locate poles, wires, cables, and fixtures, including the necessary anchors, guys, and other such sustaining and protecting fixtures to be owned and used in common by your petitioners along and across the following public way or ways. Fairfield Terrace, place 1 jointly owned pole numbered telephone number 6S, electric number 8, on the easterly side of Fairfield Terrace at a point approximately 135 feet northerly from the center line of Greenacre Avenue. The reason to place 1 pole on Fairfield Terrace is to provide support to the existing pole line and to provide for the distribution of intelligence and telecommunications and the transmission of high and low voltage electric current. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Bill?
So currently, the tree is holding up the lines?
Currently, the tree has been removed.
Oh, it has, okay.
The pole used to be held by pole 7 used to be held by a guy wire attached to that tree. Currently, the guy wire is not attached to anything.
So you're reinstalling the same guy wire or new guy wires? I mean, the diagram doesn't show where those go.
The diagram has the bold pole. That's where the tree used to be. We'll be installing a new pole there. And then the guy wire goes the 73 feet north to the existing pole, electric pole 7, telephone pole 6.
Okay, if there are any other questions of Mr. Reisinger? I'm going to ask if there's any public comments. Well, unfortunately, you have to step forward so people can hear you.
Hi.
Wait a second.
You have to go over
Please,
to the mic.
the microphones here aren't for us, they're for the people at home to hear you. So if you just identify yourself and...
Hi, I'm Donna Langiza. I live at 162 Greenacre Avenue and on the corner of Fairfield and Greenacre. So that pole will be beside my property. And it used to be a tree. However, it used to be a beautiful tree. However, over the years, I think the guide wire kind of just killed the tree, and it took a long time before it finally fell. Pieces and pieces were falling off, and as children went by to school and everything, and I called town, called Eversource. I didn't call Verizon, though, maybe I should have. And so it was a problem. But now it's gone. It fell about 11 o'clock one night in the, I think it was the spring or summer, it went down. So that was a good time to fall because nobody was walking around. Anyway, so that's been kind of ignored. So I was wondering, on this pole you're putting there, I'd like to have like nothing there on our property, or beside our property, because we had that tree and the guide wire for so long. Could it be moved up a little bit? A little more north? Do you have a picture?
We could, yeah, the picture's right here.
Oh,
That's
good,
the
okay,
new
yeah.
pole. If you wish, we can discuss this and then come back. Continuance until
Yeah, you
later in the
want
night, if that's fine.
Later tonight?
How much
Yeah,
later?
we
How
could
much
certainly
later?
do that. We're going to be here for
Discuss this right now.
Okay.
for a little while. I just have a couple of comments, and I guess that's for you, Mr. Reisinger, and that is because the path of the wires takes a turn at, I don't know what you're calling it, pole 7 or whatever it is, because it's the stress of those wires that requires a guideline to hold the pole back, so that, because normally poles in line just don't necessarily have guide wires.
Yes, the pole on the map labeled T.6/E7, the north pole.
Yeah?
That one is what's called a dead end pole. Our cables end there and don't continue any further, which means the strand on that pole is pulling the pole north. So right now, because there is no guy wire and no supporting pole or tree, the pole is leaning quite badly. So we'll be placing a new pole south of it and attaching the guy wire to it to kind of pull the pole back to make it upright again.
Yeah, it really is leaning. It's bad.
The diagram we have, Ms. Ngiza, actually shows the pole being placed more on number 69 Fairfield Terrace, and it's actually just technically, it's on the town's property in this tree belt.
Yes,
not
it
on
is
the
on the
individual
town's
property. But
Right, I realize that. So by 69, that's interesting, okay, because the tree was by the edge of my property.
Right, but
Yes.
So- so
it
it's gonna
actually
be like-
shows it to
So it's going
be
to be,
more in the 69.
Oh,
I believe your
okay.
driveway is right
I
here.
Thank
think
you.
there's a limit to how far we can actually, A, they can put it, and B, because of the location, it's got to be in a tree belt that,
Yeah, we wish to keep it in line with the rest of the poles going north, and the trees in the area kind of limit our options as to where it can be.
and I will say, if you go on Google Maps and you look at what the tree looked like that was holding it up, I have to tell you, I looked twice before I realized it was a dead tree, because it looked like it was a foam pole. I mean, it was a dead tree.
it was at one time very beautiful, nice maple, but when it fell, it had no roots. The roots had all dissolved, and it's been years, so thankfully, no one was injured or killed, or, because the kids were always going by there, going to school, coming back from school. You know, it was just a constant problem, which I reported many times, but nothing was ever done.
It seems to me that there's a pretty important, there's a real need for something to hold those poles up and those wires aligned, but, I don't know, does anybody else have any other questions?
Okay, can I do it?
Okay.
Does it show my property?
What I'm going to do is ask for a motion to close the hearing. We can reopen it if necessary, if you folks need to come back with a different proposal, but at this point, we're going to,
Well, if they don't come back with a different proposal, you're still going to have to open it again, aren't you?
no.
Oh, no, you can just vote,
We
okay.
can just vote.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is ask for a motion to close the hearing.
So
And
moved.
and is there a second to, motion's made by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Lakisa to close the hearing. And what we're going to do is we'll hold off on voting on this for a little bit and see if you folks need to make any modifications, or if you can make, use this photo, at least the diagram we've got, because otherwise we're going to have to all get notified again. All right, all those in favor of closing the hearing? Vote is 5-0. Okay, so we're going to just suspend the hearing's closed, but we'll hold off on our vote until you step out in the hall and see what decisions you might want to make.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, Richard, I'd like to move back to our discussion that we tried to start a few meetings ago, which is a Charter Review Commission, Charter Review Committee. Charter Review Committee had some recommendations about the capital planning process and the capital planning committee. And I was wondering if you had any recommendations you wanted to talk about or review on that.
Yeah, I got some stuff I want to read over. As I told Mark when I got here earlier tonight, this is a wonderful way to blow 7 hours of your life today, sitting at a computer looking at all this stuff. I did jot down some notes I'd like to read. It said, November 18, 2003, the Longmeadow Town Meeting authorized the creation of capital stabilization fund to be used to fund items meeting the definition of capital as defined by the Capital Planning Committee and Board of Selectmen. Town of Longmeadow Select Board established a capital planning committee consisting of 6 members appointed by the Select Board for a 3-year staggered term, plus a designee from the Finance Committee. In 2004, voters in Longmeadow adopted the charter that provided for the creation of the capital plan. We do have some state guidelines for these plans, a fairly large set of guidelines. It's right here. It's a pretty good sized document, like 60 pages, so it's not all information, there's plans in there or anything else. State guidelines, the capital improvement program is a blueprint for planning a community's capital expenditure and is one of the most important responsibilities of local government officials. It coordinates community planning, financial capacity, and physical development. A capital improvement program is comprised of 2 parts, a capital budget and a capital program. The capital budget is the upcoming year's spending plan for the capital items, tangible assets, or projects that cost at least $10,000. This is from the state regs, by the way, and have a useful life of at least 5 years. The capital program is the plan for the capital expenditures that extend 5 years beyond the capital budget. Development of a CIP, which is Capital Improvement Program, that will ensure sound physical and capital planning requires effective leadership and involvement and cooperation of municipal departments. For this reason, these manuals place responsibility and oversight for the CIP process with the community chief executive / the Board of Selectmen, which appoints a CIP committee. That's where we have a slight departure. These are the state guidelines I was reading you, which establishes the program. But in our case, we have shifted a lot of this responsibility between the select board and the town manager. Some of the items that are supposed to be brought about by a sound program is a complete properly developed CIP has the following benefits: facilitates, coordinates between capital needs and the operating budget, enhances the community's credit rating, controls its tax rate, and avoids sudden changes in debt service requirements, identifies the most economical means of financing capital projects, increases opportunities for obtaining federal and state aid, relates public facilities to other facilities and private developments, and redevelops policies and plans, focuses attention on community objectives and fiscal capacities, keeps the public informed about future needs and projects, coordinates the activities of neighboring and overlapping units of local government, and reduces duplication. And the 10th item is encourages careful planning and design to avoid costly mistakes and help a community reach desired goals. The charter took some of the intended duties recommended by the state for the capital planning community and gave them to the town manager when we had the charter come in. There was a lot of the things in here that were basically went 100% to the select boards instead of the chief executives. This particular document was made up for basically towns, not cities, because they're much larger and they have bigger planning departments. So it was made for towns, but you have to understand it could be a town of 500 people or a town like we with 16,000 people and with a full DPW and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of reasoning and involvement and changing in these documents to move. The manual was designed for use of towns where it was believed there may be a lack of professional positions to provide adequate planning and oversight. Some major answers will still need to be answered as we move forward. There are compelling reasons why we need more and more information on future expenditures long before these obligations are required to facilitate proper planning and fiscal responsiveness. This type of planning prevents flavor of the day management. Flavor of the day management, it's a term I've always used. You may have seen it here. I've seen it in other places. I've seen it in the federal government where let's just say you have a water cooler fail, and all of a sudden the utility foreman says, well, I think I'm going to change all the water coolers now since one has failed. And they don't seem to go back and do a history and say, well, this water heater unit is only 3 years old, this one's 6 years old. They just go across the board and start changing them out. It's flavor of the day. It's an easy program. Nobody debates it, and they just go with it. This can only be accomplished through comprehensive future planning. Simple question: how many roofs we need to replace in the next 15 years? This is where you start to get into the real planning documents. 15 years. How many heating plants will replace in 15 years? How many window units at the schools and the community buildings do we need in the next 15 years? When you're dealing with the plan, you'd use your house as an example. I mean, you sit in your own home and you say, well, you know, my water heater's 5 years old. 6 years from now, I'm likely going to have to replace that thing. So you start planning ahead, and you start budgeting ahead. We expect the communities and cities to do the same thing. They have to be looking far-reaching as to what their needs are. The one main thing is they can't pretend to do this without comprehensive evaluations and comprehensive inventories of knowing what is out there, the ages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all brought out very, very heavily in the state recommendations for program development. Reference to manner, we currently have some aspects of long-range planning, but there are areas where growth is still needed. The state recommends that as one of its first duties that we do perform an inventory, a total inventory. Now, we have made some leaps and bounds. Stephen, I think you and I have talked. We have a pavement management program. We have a fairly long-range pavement program now. We have a fairly long-range program for our sidewalks. Maria, there may be some other ones, but I'm very familiar with them. You have more and more being worked up on sewage systems and water systems where we're acquiring much more information about the infrastructures that we have. It never stops until it's finished because the task is so enormous. It is unbelievably large. And if you really get on the top of your game or way up on the top of the game, you're actually doing a condition assessment of your facilities every 1 to 2 years and updating this massive inventory. This inventory is not just a 5-year capital program. It can be 30, 40 years out because if you're replacing roofs every 30 years, then you want a program that reaches 30 years. So you can look out and say in 15 years from now, folks, I'm going to have $2 million worth of roofs coming forward. So you start planning early, shifting priorities and planning. It's a large program to put together, but a very important program to put together. So some of the other questions that come up with the plan that we have now or with the modifications of the charters, what is the relationship between the town manager and the capital planning committee? The capital planning committee should have independent authority to ask questions of anyone in support of programs being evaluated. Current recommendations for the charter language do not address this issue. Possibly one of the greatest omissions that I see that we have in the capital planning process is the lack of a project development checklist. And correct me if I'm wrong if we have something in place. This type of planning tool can save valuable time and money when properly implemented. With the expanding list of project development factors, it has become an imperative that we utilize project development checklists to avoid oversights in the process. No project should ever be proposed, even by a citizen's petition, without first having an overview of that project. We had something come up just very recently about a project down on the river that was canceled. And it was canceled because once they awarded the money, and it wasn't a capital, this was a community preservation, and it was awarded the money, and then they got to research and found out that, wow, there's a lot of requirements. Well, to a professional facilities person, somebody that's dealing with this most of their career, they would automatically know. You automatically, when you talk about the Riverway, you've got environmental concerns, you've got the Corps of Army Engineers, there's a litany of things that automatically pops into mind. This is unknown to a citizen that may be putting in a petition for this. So somewhere in this process, we need an intercept that says every project that comes into us, regardless of how it comes in, goes through the first filter. And it's like it comes out of Mario's shop with his branch of technical services. That's where most of the regulations will come up. Also with the Historic Commission, also with the Conservation Commission, weighing in and saying, yes, this is a green light. This one, I don't see any problems. So you're identifying problems up front, which makes for a much smoother program. It also opens the window to where you could possibly start to enter a realm where we phase projects now, to where you give design money this year or you give study money. You tag the project as being accepted and it's started in the system, but you only give X amount of dollars just to get to the next step. And at this point, I don't think we're doing that. You know, if I'm wrong, correct me. But that is the really professional planning aspect that you get going. And it's a long-term thing, and it takes a lot of energy. Once it's started, though, it continues basically on its own because new generations come in and they're born into the system, so they continue with it. I think that's a major omission that I've seen. And Stephen, I think since you and I have been here, we've seen a lot of projects that started and just dropped because there was something wrong. And most of the time, it was a basic checklist item. Nobody seemed to know that it was needed. Overview for constructability. The policy should be applied for all funding sources regardless of origination. The outcome of this process may be recommendations for funding for additional studies before moving the project forward. I don't know how we go to the next plateau in the town for our community planning, but it needs to reach into a lot of different funding sources, because I don't think any project should be thrust upon you, Stephen, by anybody without going through a vetting process. It's unfair. It's very disruptive to your programs that you've developed. And I know you've experienced, and Mario's experienced that in the last couple of years. There's been stuff come out of the woodwork that all of a sudden has changed the whole plan. And now you're off chasing the rabbit's tail and going into the bushes, and you don't know where it's going to finally end up. And it's good intentions, but those good intentions aren't vetted in and they're not homogenized into our program, which they need to be. And I think that's up to us. I think we need to start to ensure that this is done to prevent the hiccups that take place in the plan. The charter does not seem to establish firm timelines for events concerning the capital process. The guidelines have some pretty firm events. I mean, they start early, like in October 1st. The plan is here and this, that, and the other. And I think it's like, I equate to it's like having a full tank of gas or empty tank of gas. You know, you make up your mind when you're going to have the full tank of gas and you fill it up, other than running on empty until you run out. We can have the process in June if we need to, because it is not solely budget dependent. It is budget dependent at the end, but it's not an operational budget thing. Capital is an ongoing thing. It really is something that breathes every month. There's changes. Mario, you know that. Change is taking place constantly. I mean, if you watch that plan, it's constantly moving priorities. Small ones, maybe not the major ones, but there's constant changes that are taking place. The charter also did not really address membership of the committee. It talked about 6 and 1, but it didn't get heavily into the fact is, if we're going to move forward like we're doing with your building committee, and you've staffed that with some fine, fantastic people, and you're seeing the benefit of that, Steve, and I know you are, there's the level of discussions that are taking place are more than they were before, the level of the discussions. The same thing needs to take place on capital, because if this group is going to function as a benefit to the organization, then the highest quality people with the most technical expertise need to be in there helping evaluate projects. The real kick in the pants, in which I can't put my hands on or put my finger on really close, this thing in the capital plan, as I talked about it, are made for a town from 600 up to likely 35,000 people. Obviously, this town has a lot more resources and technical expertise and knowledge and management theory and practice than a town of 600. By the sheer dynamics of the people that work here and the staff that you're able to attract and the organizations that you're able to build. So I don't quite know where the capital program most effectively enhances your operation instead of hinders your operation. And I think that's something that we'd need to really find out, where's the balance point. I could tell you where it was if you had 500, a town of 500. I could tell you right now, you likely really, really, really do need it. But with this size of a town, I start to drag back a little bit and say, at what level do you need it? There are some aspects that I think we definitely need, like an advisory board, like the a project, when it moves forward, it goes through the checklist process, and if it doesn't meet the checks, it doesn't move forward. And that's a very important part. The other thing that was not really identified in the charter or in much of the language that I read today is, what's the purpose of capital planning committee? Really, what's the purpose? Now, the state guidelines, they really don't tell you much about it other than they developed the program, but they said, okay, what is the purpose for it? Is it to compensate for a smaller workforce that doesn't have the expertise? Is it meant as a civilian oversight by the Mass General Law? Is that what they wanted, was a civilian oversight? An extra person, an independent person at the table peering in? And I'm not sure what it was. I mean, we all have an idea what we thought it was. I'm sure, Stephen, sometimes you, like you say, it's a hindrance, because sometimes it may be an opposition and you don't want to take time with it as a manager with stuff moving fast. I can understand it. I think everybody at this table understands that. But it still is not totally defined. And Mark and I both spent a lot of time on capital. And I don't know if either of us can tell you that definition for our town and what the role and function should be when it's squeakily brought down. I think that's where we likely have the growth to take. The next point of our growth is an open dialogue with Mario and town manager and sitting down and saying, okay, where can this really benefit and not be a hindrance? Where are the weaknesses? Where are the problems? Where are the areas that you have problems that you could use extra hands with somebody looking at something? So, Mark, at that point, it's hard to make quantified changes right now, except, like you, I read through everything and I identified a lot about the same stuff that you were identifying. I identified a couple things that you didn't catch on because I've used them before and I recognize they're usually part of the planning process. I would still think that this item is important enough for us to not put it on hold, but to take the time to go ahead and get with Stephen and get with Mario and sit down in a room, have a cup of coffee, and talk about the thing. What do we want it to really be? If we're going to modify it, now, Stephen, you met with the Charter Commission. I mean, you got these things in here. And I've got a couple things here that I mentioned tonight that I really think we need. And I think you'd agree once you see them and you acknowledge that we've had some problems, we've had hiccups that we can avoid in the future. And the composition of the committee, I think it should be the most knowledgeable people that we can find walking the face of the earth in Long Meadow to serve on a capital planning committee if they're truly going to bring a lot to the table and be able to sit and equate and talk instead of a rubber stamp. Because if it's going to be just a rubber stamp program, then we likely don't need a capital planning committee anyway. Being honest. We just say it is and disband it and let it sit over there and you guys take the horse and run. And
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, kind of open up to anybody has any questions for you. I got about 100,000, but
Yeah.
go ahead, Willie.
So you're saying, going back to what is the real purpose of the committee,
Mhm.
and were you saying that you wanted it to be all projects go through it for a planning checklist? So a CPC, citizens petition, even anything that the town's bringing forward goes through this filter, but then when it comes to the actual capital plan, the town manager and the department heads go ahead and, using their planning process, say, okay, this has gone through the filter, now this is where we're going out for the next 5 years, and then, so they don't really approve the capital plan, they're earlier in the process.
Right. The filter mechanism is something that is used for any project moving forward. And it prevents hiccups. Like, I am sure if you had a good checklist up here, as soon as you went down the Connecticut River, you would have hit a hiccup that would have said, nope, we've got DEP in here, we got Corps of Army engineers in here, we got environment, we got a multitude of things that are going to stop us from doing that, including the salamanders like somebody's just found.
Can I just, because we do have because you said, correct you if you're wrong,
Yeah.
Sort of. We do have, I don't think we call it a project checklist, but we do have a project intake form, and there's a cover sheet,
Right.
talks about what year the project is scheduled for, how much it's going to cost, why we need it. So we do have those for ours. I think the examples of, certainly I want to give Mario credit. Since he's been here, I don't think we've missed the mark on a project that we have generated and presented to the Capital Planning Committee, that the Capital Planning in turn has recommended to the Select Board, that the Select Board has in turn recommended to town meeting, and the town meeting has in turn funded. I think we've done, in fact, our record, like I said, especially since Mario's been here, has been excellent for internal generated projects, and that includes projects we generate that we've applied to CPA for, because we use our same intake forms or checklist, whatever you want to call it, to submit to CPA as well. The hiccups are, especially over the last few years, really tied to citizens' petitions to the CPA, almost exclusively. And that's not a knock on the citizens or the CPA. I think everyone who fills out those applications believes they are getting good information. Doing work, if you will, in a municipality or in any level of government is just different than doing it privately. But many of the citizens take the approach that you would take with your house. Call up a contractor, have him go look at it, and have him give you a quote.
Right.
That's where we've missed the mark. Steve Weiss was here, and I've talked to him about it at length, about having citizens petitions projects on town assets that don't go through the DPW or the town manager or the select board, and how that causes us, not only does the work end up getting kind of placed on us with not a lot of information, we have issues that come up where it is inadequate money, or it's not a right phase, or what have you, and we're playing catch up, and it takes a lot of time. I think, and then just to go back to the Capital Planning Committee and the mission, I did spend a lot of time at the Charter Review Committee talking about this subject, and I want to make it clear, and I know everyone here agrees with this, the people that serve on the Charter Review Committee currently are great people, and they spend a lot of time on it, and they take their role very seriously.
Capital planning?
Capital Planning Committee. Yes. Did I say Charter Review?
Yeah, you said charter.
No, those people were terrible. I'm glad that it's all over. No, Capital Planning Committee does an excellent job, but there are no requirements for certain kinds of disciplines or background requirements like we do with the Permanent Building Committee. And it's not that people can't learn. It's just that, as Richard said, I think calling it a different level of discussion is appropriate. People who have been in the field of building, construction, management, or have done a lot of projects as an owner of a business, just have a different perspective. They're starting off at this place when you start talking about projects. versus someone who may be a physician or an accountant or something like that who's starting off back here. They spend a lot of time on it, and they, like I said, they take it very seriously, and I think we have an excellent working relationship with them. Mario goes to all those meetings. Jeff McGallman has gone to the meetings and kind of presented the findings. I usually go to the, like, one of the last ones they do. But if the mission, I guess one of my points to the Charter Review Committee is, it's not a knock on the committee itself with the members of the committee, but in concept, if it is citizen review of capital projects, then then the select board gets it and does its own capital plan, and so the select board is then citizen review of capital planning projects, and then town meeting has the final say anyway. So how many layers of citizen review do you really need to figure out if you want to replace a pickup truck? And I know that's kind of a cheap analogy, but I guess I looked at it as somewhat, in concept, somewhat redundant, because the select board does a lot of that work itself as well and asks a lot of the same great questions.
Yeah, we weren't talking about pickup, and I agree with you. By the time it gets to select board, we shouldn't be asking really anything other than just general questions, because it should have been properly vetted by that point.
But I'd like to just add a couple of things in here. One is that I see the Capital Planning Committee as a large degree citizens review, and at times they've taken on other responsibilities like project analysis and review, because there was a perception that was coming to them wasn't fully developed as a project. Now, maybe that hasn't been the case in the last few years, but clearly early on there were things that were just a shell of an idea, and I continue to go back to the great debacles of capital in this community, and the Blinn tennis courts is People's Exhibit A, that we were going to spend $200,000 and then we were going to spend $300,000.
Started at 87.
87,000? Yeah,
87,000.
and we ended up spending upwards of $1.2 million or something like that on it, and so although there's a component of that, I think the largest part of it is the citizens' input to, yeah, we buy into this prioritization that's being set by our professionals in town. The people who use the facilities and look at them set that priority. When it gets to the select board, I think that we ought to be looking at the prioritization set by the Capital Planning Committee and just say, we don't have that much money anymore because we've chosen to pull money. But at that point, shame on us for resorting their prioritization. I mean, they're going to spend hopefully weeks on it, and we're going to spend minutes, maybe an hour or so on it. But it's very easy for us to say, we've decided that it's more important to spend $100,000 on something else and not put it into capital and change the overall budget. So I think that this concept of town to Capital Planning Committee to Select Board to town meeting, I think it works. Or I think it can work, and sometimes it works better than other times. And if we define the role that each group has, perhaps a little bit better, we won't find ourselves duplicating the work done by others, but rather adding the component that each step is uniquely qualified or capable to add. And I think that's one of the things that's been missing. So I guess, Richard, I heard everything you said. I took a bunch of notes. I have some questions about things, but ultimately, we can have a discussion, but ultimately we've got to get down to our charter sections 2-11 and section 7-7, which define the Capital Planning Committee and define the roles of the Capital Planning Committee, and come up with a proposal to modify those to do the things we talked about. And all the discussion in the world isn't going to put that down on paper. At some point, we got to, kind of commit it down to paper. Marie?
Can we go to another meeting so I can take
Yeah.
Richard's thoughts?
Oh, I wasn't going to,
Okay.
there's no way we're going to be able to do that tonight.
Okay, I thought
But
you were going to go right to that.
there's no way in the world. I think what we need to do is put together a draft of, if you will, just like the Charter Review Committee did. Here's what they proposed as changes to the charter dealing with capital, and take the comments Richard had, and maybe some of the comments made tonight. Richard, I'd agree that maybe you, and I'd love to join you, to sit down with the town manager and the director of the DPW and sit down and say, okay, how can we make this stuff work, knowing that what the Charter Review Committee has recommended, and come back to this board with literally a marked up section, track changes section of sections 211 and 7-7 of the charter or something that we can propose. Go ahead, Rich.
Let me ask, does anybody have any opposition to anything I said tonight?
Not opposition.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the emphasis, the important thing, what I really liked is when you said how all year round, as projects come up, whether it's because we all of a sudden lost a plow, or citizen petitions are starting to come to the surface, that it's a
Right.
year-round process. I
Okay,
like
well,
that a lot.
if that's true, then I can start to work, let's say, a little bit of language and do some chatting around and.
The only issue is, we only get two bites at the apple for town meeting
Right.
approval. I mean, we can always have a special town meeting, but it doesn't make sense to do that for this. So, I supported last year. We should probably have capital projects in our May town meeting and potentially some in November. The question is, how do you reserve money for November that, I made some suggestions, and I'll follow through with those suggestions, that, you have a list, and if the projects can be deferred, you defer them, and in November, because they're lower priority, if November something else comes up that's more important, you slot those in and something drops off. But if they don't come up, then in November, you already know what you're gonna be doing. But, I think that's a key component, Richard, when you said there's no firm timeline. I just put down the note that, well, there kind of is timelines, because the May and November really set our timelines.
Right.
Steve?
So the only thing I'd say is, and let me say this: the process, the way it is now, it does work. I guess I would make the case that it's more time consuming than I personally believe it needs to be for staff. But like I said, it's not like we don't prepare the information. It's not like we don't present it to the capital planning committee, and that all goes well. And like I said, they've been very supportive. We've listened to the feedback we've gotten from the select board and the capital planning committee and made refinements, as you noted a couple weeks ago. One of the things we did was we brought on an on-call architect engineer to help us better develop our specs. The DPW and other departments monitor projects and needs and things like that year-round. I mean, you get the monthly reports from the DPW. They're very thick. They reference things that may be on the horizon if you track those. Capital planning needs to be a tighter timeline, simply because when we have run into problems, it has been because, in Blinn tennis courts, the Blinn tennis courts started off,
That was big scope creep.
big scope creep. But then when we finally thought we had the scope right, it turns out we didn't know the market. And so when you guys have heard me say this, but for anybody who may be listening at home, they develop their cost estimating and their specs and their quotes, October. Well, by the time, we have them out on the street for bidding and open the bids, it's at best August. So almost a full year later, between the time we develop the information that drives the ask for money and the time we actually open the envelopes on our best case scenario, it's almost a year, and usually it's a year or more, because we just can't have, the town generously funds a lot of projects, and we just can't run them all at the same time, because we have improved our capacity, but we still have a limited capacity, and we want to make sure that we don't have too many things going at once and we make mistakes on the ones that we have going. The Morningside culvert replacement's a good example of one we just said we'll do that in the spring because we had Dwight Road going and the DPW and a bunch of other projects. We try and manage our time carefully that way. So all that being said, it really is more making sure we're specific about what parts of the process are working, what things change. And I think my recommendation was, when the board created the permanent building committee, it was important to have qualifications. And I think the audit committee also has qualifications.
Yes, they do.
I don't think the finance committee does, but adding qualifications, I think, would be an important step to maybe economizing that process a little bit more. And the other thing is, I know it should be the board spends only a little bit of time on it because the capital planning committee has already done that review, but there is a history of that not actually happening. Of late, I think it's, as we've made refinements and improvements to the process, we've all been a lot better about getting through that a lot more efficiently. But in the past, there has been times where it's been lengthy discussions at the board level. But I do welcome the opportunity to talk to you about this further and talk to Mario and see if we can make the process even more efficient.
Okay, thank you. So unless anybody has an objection, what I'd like to do is send Mr. Foster back off to reduce his thoughts and comments and some of the other thoughts and comments he's seen with some discussions down to a written proposal that we can look at and propose for a charter
Take more of my
modification.
free time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're getting well paid for this. Richard.
Yeah, well paid, yeah.
Any objections?
No, I would just ask that maybe one or two charter committee members, who I'm sure would be glad to give, even though their commissions have expired, maybe invite them so they can give you their recollection of that conversation as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good. Okay, thank you. Before we move on, I see that Mr. Reisinger from representing Verizon has, see if there's been any change to the proposal. Although the hearing's closed, we're going to just go ahead and let you talk.
Good evening. I spoke with Donna Lingiza and Larry Emerson, two of the abutters. We were just discussing the exact placement and scope of work to be done of this pole. They were simply misinformed about where the pole would be exactly, because we don't generally send maps to abutters. We just send a card that says, hey, there's going to be a public hearing. They are both fine with, as far as I could tell, they're both fine with precisely where the placement is on the map.
I see him in the back of the room. Do I get a nod? Yeah?
Okay.
Great, okay, thank you.
Good negotiation.
Thank you very much. Marie?
I want to thank you. You were very sensitive, and that little extra work you put in, I really appreciate that. I haven't seen that before from Verizon, so great job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we've got, the hearing's closed. We need a vote to approve the, this Verizon petition 1A3 DP4E.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion's made by Mr. Foster, seconded by Mr. Lowe. Any questions, concerns, comments? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Reisinger. I appreciate it, and thanks to Mr. Emerson and Ms. Lingiza
Thank you for your time.
for coming in to make sure we got this right, or that Verizon got this right. Thanks so much. The next item, to follow up on Richard Foster's comments about the Charter Review Committee, I asked Stephen to prepare for us or provide us with the list of capital projects that have been submitted to the Capital Planning Committee for this year. It was as much for informational to keep us in the loop of what's going on. I'm trying not to turn this into a project review committee, but if anybody has any specific questions about either what the project means or the reason for the requested funding source, kind of entertain that. And go ahead, Maria.
I was to say, Mark, could I do just a brief introduction?
Sure.
Do you want to go ahead before I do that?
Go ahead.
Oh.
You can do the brief, then I'll jump in.
It's just, let me say it and then tell me it's wrong. Again, Mario and his team, as well as there is some fire department and Parks and Rec and IT projects in here. The town professionals did, I think, an excellent job of doing research on these. We received a total of $6,256,000 in requests, and we were looking at a general fund budget of about $2 million, which means, and then that would be supplemented by water and sewer funding. We're projecting the amount of almost $400,000, $391,000. CPA funding of about $363,000, and Chapter 90 and stormwater funding in the amount of almost $700,000. So on the general fund requests, it was a challenge this year because the top three requests at the schools were all kind of big ticket items, and they are $300,000 for network switchgear equipment and replacement of wireless access points. That's actually town-wide, kind of, they call it the back end infrastructure for how we sit here tonight and do our thing wirelessly and how, you know, our network performs. There's another Blueberry placement at Blueberry Hill. Another one of those are famous Burnham boilers. And then the fire alarm panel and detectors at Replacement Center School, which is $250,000. They're all obviously needs that when we evaluate the projects, there's ranking criteria that we use, and those hit all the spots, especially, you know, the consequence of failure of any of those things is
Public safety.
public safety, ability to do work
Right.
here in network through our network, which we are dependent, and then of course the boiler. We've been through that when you only have one functioning boiler and we get a cold snap, and so we want to make sure we're vigilant about those. So we had to, and this is just my recommendation to the capital planning committee. So you can see I've made some selective adjustments. I have suggested bonding for certain things. We talked about debt exclusion for Wolf Swamp Fields at the board. And potentially some other bonding or some short-term bans or something like that. We've also talked about the stormwater fee as supplementing some of this. I will also tell you that the CPA did meet and approve several of our projects.
Yeah, 2.
Do you have that list?
2 or 3.
Yeah.
So, on your list, the Bliss Playground resurfacing was approved by CPA, and there's the one that was denied was the new playground at Blueberry School, and the other one that was approved, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
Library roof.
Thank you, library roof was approved.
And I think they approved the citizens petition for some additional funding for Wolf Swamp.
I think in the event that the town
Yeah.
meeting doesn't
$200,000.
pass.
We were wondering, there was both
So,
there, okay.
since this is kind of a generalized update, and again, I want to separate the CPA from the capital, one of the things we've done is we report them all jointly, because I think when I started, they were kind of siloed, and I think it's important to keep it all together so town meeting voters can get the full view of what we're planning for capital. But obviously, the processes by which they get to the warrant are very different. And the CPA does, as Steve Steve Weiss reported, they have their own independent, statutorily granted, decision-making process. So, and for our perspective, the decision of what to put on, of what to apply to capital for, and what to apply, and what to recommend to the capital planning, what to apply to community preservation committee versus what we recommend to the capital planning committee is based on discussions that we have with both chairs and a review of, and our knowledge of the CPA programs. We stopped, it used to be we were applied for both. We would apply for CPA and recommend to capital. We've kind of eliminated that process because we just have to pick the right path and make sure that if it's a priority, it stays in one part or the other. So, I know I said brief introduction, that was a little less than brief. But the short of it is the recommendations, I missed the mark a little bit. I'm $130 over on the general funds based on our policy. That number may actually, that 130 may actually grow depending on what we do with the budget to try and get the budget balanced at a 2% increase. So I welcome any questions, comments, or feedback on the.
So, again, I'm trying to not make this a capital projects reviews per se, but more in terms of, things that we want to find out about so we can educate ourselves going into that review, but also about the funding. And to that degree, I guess, Stephen, my question is, based on what you just said and the way that you try to conceptualize that some of these projects are more appropriate for capital, for community preservation. So take a project like the playground project, the Blueberry Hill Playground project that was submitted, Bliss Playground resurfacing. So I guess that was approved, right, the Bliss Playground?
Yes.
So the Blueberry Hill Playground was not approved for 227. You know, was that, you know, when you do look at that, if that's sufficiently high on your priority list, but yet you hope that they approve it and then they don't, does it come back and you say, well, maybe we do need to do it through our capital planning process, or does it just get dropped because it was in the CPA list column and CPA chose not to fund it?
So a good example of that last year was the library windows that CPA ended up funding, but I think at the time I reported to the board that if the CPA did not fund the windows, I was going to amend the plan or recommend to the capital planning committee that they amend the plan and put the windows in the capital plan, the annual capital plan, because that was a high priority for us. I don't say lucky, but because of the level of preparation and communication we've done, we haven't been in that situation yet. The Blueberry Playground equipment is something that needs to be done over time, but it's not, you know, in the schools do their own prioritization, the school committee ranks their own projects, and I generally defer to their judgment in terms of what they believe are their priorities. And so it wasn't on the same level as a network, you know, switchgear and wireless access point. So when I said it's not looking good at CPA, they said, okay, we'll try again next year.
But you do look at them. I guess the other thing that the same question would apply to is bonding. You know, we've got, not right now, a couple of, one is the Wolf Swamp Fields, which is, I'm just looking at the column you have here of recommended bonds. You have, you know, Wolf Swamp Fields irrigation and leveling, Wolf Swamp Fields front parking lot, and Willowbrook Road drainage improvements. You've got those recommended for bonding, and I think those are the only three I saw in that.
There's one more for sewer. The north
Okay,
intercept
yeah,
there.
but that's under water and sewer, that's a water and sewer
Sure.
bond as opposed to a capital project bond, you're right. And I guess my question is, you know, are any of those important enough that if the town chooses not to bond them, that we would want to work them through the capital, you know, the capital plan? And I say that only because I think that's how, you know, it's my opinion that we ought to look at this. Bonding, especially if they're debt exclusion bonds, means we're adding supplemental taxes to the residents of Longmeadow to pay for a project, whether it's the Wolf Swamp Field project or the Willowbrook Road drainage project, because it's not going to be fully paid through by our storm sewer utility yet. And so those would all be supplemental tax rates. And the question is, are we comfortable enough that they're high enough priority that we want to do them through supplemental tax rates relative to do them through our basic tax rate, and say, do you want to supplementally tax yourself for these other capital projects? I think, you know, am I making myself clear? In other words, you know, why are we telling the townspeople, well, these are coming out of your tax base and these are supplemental? Maybe they want these to come out of their tax base and have these be supplemental, and because with the purpose of potentially not passing.
Yeah, we'd have the best soccer fields in the world and water mains that would be rusted shut. I mean, that's generally how this would go.
Well,
you know, as the, you know, elected chief executives of the community, like we know, that there are certain things mostly underground that need to be done to maintain our systems. The vast majority of the community, or not the vast majority, but many people in the community, especially town meeting voters, that's not a priority for them because it's out of sight, out of mind. But the soccer fields definitely are, and so I think it really the magic word for me. Well, there's two magic words. One is value, and the other is balance. And we try and balance everything out as best we can. The discussion about whether or not to put the Wolf Swamp Fields project as a whole onto the warrant as a debt exclusion is a policy decision. And I think, quite frankly, when the board had the discussion, I thought it was a good discussion, and I think it makes sense. I do think that there's a fair number of people in this community, and the fields are used widely enough that the community will at least many members of the community, maybe not 2/3 majority and then a simple majority, but many people in the community would want to supplement or have a supplemental tax to have great soccer, to have great athletic fields there. For the same reason the town voted to have CPA in the first place. I kind of view those things the same way. If either the board or town meeting or the voters at the ballot box decide Wolf Swamp Fields isn't worth the supplemental taxes, then we're going to go back to
Phasing it.
CPA and phasing it and doing it, over the next 6-7 years.
And I know I'm beating this horse again, but I believe we need to give or let the people in town meeting know that there's an alternative to doing, because what we're saying to them is either it's a supplemental tax or it doesn't get done, and that's not the only, this isn't a binary decision. That the potential exists to say, look, if we spend $100,000 a year less or $150,000 a year less on our $800,000 street paving budget, we can fund this project without supplemental taxes. That's at least one alternative to the binary of supplemental taxes or not doing it at
I
all.
understand. The board took a vote, Mark. I mean, if you want to revisit the question, that's fine.
Well,
But the
and-
board
and-
already, the board took the vote, so it's in here, reflected in accordance to the board's
And I
vote.
understand that, but the point is, but people at town meeting need to be presented with the facts, that it's not either you do it this way or you'd never get them.
But I think what they're going to be presented with is how the board voted, and if the board's, except if the board wants to revisit the vote, I've got no problem with that, but that's the public policy decision as we sit here tonight.
Right. I think the board ought to revisit the vote, because at least at the time I voted for it, I didn't realize that there was that this third option was potentially
I don't
available.
think you voted
I
in
did.
favor of it.
I'll have to go back.
But the other thing is,
don't.
it's not up to this board to tell the CPA to bond the money, Mark. I mean, that's the other thing is,
No,
the board
but I'm not
has,
saying it's CPA money.
Yep, you can bring that up when we approve the capital plan if you want to kick something else out and make a
Right.
motion to that
It's not-
effect.
It's not necessarily CPA that does the bonding. I mean, the issue is,
You want to cut down pavement and put it into that.
no, I don't think that 100% of the residents in town want to add to their tax rate
Bring it up in town meeting.
to improve programs and facilities that are used by approximately 35 or 40% of the people in town.
I bring
That's
it up in town
the
meeting
question.
because we were talking about phasing it in for 3 years, and people weren't happy with that, so we said, we'll give them the option at town meeting if they want to raise the taxes to get it done in less than 3 years. And so that can be part of the debate.
just to be clear, it was like 6 years.
6 years?
One of the reasons why if it was 3 years, I would be recommending a debt exclusion, or I would not have suggested a debt exclusion vote to the board at all. It's like 6 years.
Yeah, I think
and
it's
gonna be
5.
6 terrible years where one section of the place is always going to be torn up, and
Right.
you're going to be trying to match grades and.
I think that was agreed upon, that we don't want to have this be a 6-year implementation project.
and it was more costly that
But it
way.
can be a 6-year or more payment for a 1-year implementation project, if we choose to do
Sure
that.
glad we're not discussing this program tonight.
Yeah, aren't you glad we're,
I'm shocked that it went there.
anyway. Maureen, go ahead.
A couple of things is, one, you said to bring it up now when you present it, and it's just in the preliminary, and that is all of those Eversource and Columbia Gas incentives that came in. And I know they came in after all this planning. If you could just look at that and see what might fit in.
You have to talk to the
If this-
capital planning committee about that when Dr.
Oh,
Metz
so
gets back
I
here.
thought I had to go through, you want me to just go directly to
I've already given
Capital?
this to them. They're doing their thing with it.
Oh, so I can bring it up to Capital?
You can
All
bring
right.
it-
I thought you
You
wanted
can
to
bring
do
it
that.
when he comes back here, or you could present to him then, but we have some of the estimates. Some of the projects just aren't ready to go. As you saw from the notes, some of them need other things to happen before they get ready. The other thing is, I'll be honest with you, I haven't checked yet because the month just turned, but I want to look at the comparison of consumption at the fire department. I mean, we paid $0 for that, but is it worth? Do we get a great bang for our buck on the? Because right now it's only 70% from Columbia Gas. I continue to work with that consultant or vendor or whatever on trying to find other ways to do that, but right now the incentive is much less than it was when we did the fire department.
Also, one of the things we voted on as a board is that one of the things they're 3 or 4 indices, and you decide safety and planning, and one of them was we were going to add conservation to the list. So if I thought it was out of line for me to go directly to capital planning and give the documents, you said always give it to you and you would present it.
They
and
already
discuss
have it.
But I'm saying they
No, I'm
already,
talking about the document
I think when
list
capital
from
planning, when
Columbia.
capital planning comes here,
Oh, they already have the Columbia Gas and Eversource project
do.
list?
I sent it to
Oh, okay, good. You said me to give it to you. Okay, so it's already gone to them.
it has,
Uh-huh.
and when Dr. Metz presents his plan on behalf of the committee, that's the time to discuss them, because all they're doing is making a recommendation to the select board.
Okay. And then the final thing is you talk about removing the 2 oil tanks. And
It's 2020.
one of my concerns is that, Mark, we talked about the removal of the oil tanks early on when we were talking about projects that we were heading towards when we reviewed the projects from the Energy Committee, and you said, I like the oil tanks staying there for redundancy in case we lose gas, or the price has changed. Do you remember that conversation? So is it for hazardous issues that the oil tanks are being removed?
Yes, so they're not used anymore.
Okay.
And they're in the ground, and if they leak, that becomes a hazardous issue for, the town to have to deal with. The question is, do we want to do it now? Or one of the ideas was to do it now, deal with it up front, and then somewhere down the road when the schools, if they do combine, they won't have to face this issue. Well, there's not enough money to do that this year, so I think the idea was that we drained them, so the whatever's already spilled out of them is already out. We didn't want any more, so we took care of that piece of it. Let's leave them there, and we'll have to address it in a future year or leave it as part of the project.
One last question on that. Is there grant money or anything to remove underground oil tanks?
Not that I know of.
There is a program with the state, but it's somewhat complicated.
Bill, Bill, and
Does
Bill.
the state allow abandonment in place and filling them?
I would think you would have to minimally test around the tank to see if
Yeah.
it had leaked.
Well, he said no, and you said minimally test. Do they or don't they?
I do not believe they allow you. to
I'm
ban
not sure
place.
either, but if
They
even if
used
they
to-
did, we
They
would.
used to allow you to fill them with sand or something. I don't
Yeah,
think
they
they
don't
do.
Abandonment in
do that anymore.
place.
But I was going to ask, you have a way, you can pressure test those, can't you, see if they're leaking?
I can, but I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I know, there's a danger in that.
Well, you're empty now, aren't
You
you?
don't
We're
wanna
empty
know.
now. That doesn't mean the residual wouldn't
Yeah,
get
they've been
pushed
there for
out.
50-something years. I mean, it's,
Are they 50-year-old tanks?
I think they're original to schools.
As best I know, too. I think there's actually new tanks in the school that they use for dual fuel.
I believe we can use green community money, but is that all?
We got it spent 3 times over. Rich,
Yeah, this is
It's
a
not an ATM machine. It's
This is a-
project specific.
This is a very small point, but it comes back to what we were talking about before. We just asked what's the age of the units, and we don't really know what the age.
I might
are.
have them here. I don't
Yeah,
have it
but I mean,
committed to
that's-
memory.
That's the kind of stuff that,
But in our forms, like I said, I don't have it off the top of my head, but in the forms, we
Yeah.
talk about,
Right.
you put in what's to be replaced.
yeah, we used to get that big book, and it was all
It's
that
still a big
information.
book, it's just
was in it.
electronic now.
Yeah, well, we used to get all that, and it was nice to read. I used to sit late nights and read.
Did you want to ask
Okay.
about the phasing?
No, I don't want to
Does
ask
anybody else have any other
questions.
questions about this general funding or the general project?
Yeah, just one last thing, and we were kind of tongue in cheek, but this all, whatever CPA comes back with, we'll probably have to have a discussion about what's the fully funded amount of the capital plan for FY20 out of the general fund. If we're going to meet,
Because of the
if we're going to
budget,
meet
right.
other budget goals.
Right, right.
So, just want to put that out there.
That's why the request of the capital planning has always been set in the select board a prioritized list and not just the list, so that if funds do have to be adjusted, we know where their priorities are. So, and if you can pass that along when you talk to them, that'd be
Sure.
okay. Thank you very much.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
could I make a quick comment before
Sure.
we? So, I've been with the town a little over 3 years, and I will tell you that in that time, we've worked with capital planning to change the process a little bit. I think in my first year, we did 40-some-odd projects. Like 15 of them got funded. But the time that went into researching them all, getting the backup paperwork, it took away from the ones that were important to us to make sure that we got a good number on them. So in working with capital planning and town manager, and saying, hey, listen, the number is about $2 million every year. How about we give you $3 million worth of our important projects, and that way we can focus a little more on getting the information right, and that way we won't have the issue that you guys were all talking about where, you know, we requested a project, but there wasn't enough money because we didn't vet it properly. So I look forward to the opportunity to kind of look at what are the next steps of that program, because I think it only can go up. I mean, it started at a place that I thought was much lower. I think we've improved on it, and I think it has the ability to improve some more. So, thank you.
Okay, the last item that is on our regular agenda here is a list that Stephen's prepared for us of, I guess it's listed, of potential warrant articles for the May town meeting, and I presume that this is not yet totally complete, but this is what you know as of the date you prepared this, which is, I guess, earlier last week or mid last week. So, and just so people at home can hear it, I'm just going to read through them. One, bond the capping of the Tina Lane landfill, potentially up to $600,000. Bond to purchase streetlights, potentially $700,000. Appropriate additional FY19 Chapter 90 funds, would be $95,000. And we do that every year. It's not Chapter 90 funds. Bill of prior years that's carrying forward. So every year we have this. This is a $65 or $75 bill. Appropriate funds for the Transportation Infrastructure Enhancement Trust Fund, which is nominal. Acceptance of Park Drive. Wage settlement accounts. Eminent domain for easement on Dwight Road, which is some land being donated to the town. Tax ceiling legislation petition, which has to do with the town tax ceiling task force looking to get ahead of the curve of when we might hit the tax ceiling. Accepting Mass General Law, Chapter 51, Section 16A. You might want to define that, Stephen, for us. And then we've got a couple of charter review recommendations. We've already gone through that. The Wolf Swamp Fields, which we just talked about, potentially bonding, and additional DPW forestry trimming and removal funding. I guess that would be out of free cash. There's also a consideration for putting together some bylaws. There's a demolition bylaw, short-term rental bylaw, commercial vehicle bylaw, historic district bylaw, and open burning bylaws that are under consideration for being developed, I guess. And so that's really just kind of a preview going forward. My personal preference, Stephen, is that we not go through the process of opening and closing our warrant 12 times, that we set a date. We have everything in place, and we, get them in place, and then we close the warrant so that we get this thing done once and done right. And I know that means there's going to have to be a lot of work on preparing bylaws, and my personal concern is that generally these bylaws are prepared by the same legal people who have been doing our other legal work and have been put aside on the things that we really wanted to have done to do school committee stuff, and we're going to end up with the 4 or 5 projects that the select board wanted to get done not being done by further and further delays. I don't know the process, but
Well, I think to get specific, the demolitions of the bylaw and the historic district bylaw were both written by those committees. So council would just review those. The open burning bylaw, I think, has been prepared by the fire chief. The commercial vehicle bylaw, we've already taken a pass at, so it needs editing, not rewriting. And then the short-term rental bylaw, I think the state is preparing guidelines. Short-term rental is Airbnb. Essentially, the state has passed legislation that allows you to tax it. And so we're going to look at that. The MGL 51, Section 16A is the election registrars, I believe, where we want to go from 3 to 4 by accepting the provisions. I remember that was an issue we discussed much earlier in the year.
Yes.
So we did talk. So I think I agree with you, Mark. I want to have it all done right, which is why we're starting now. I don't think these will take very long to pull together, to be honest with you.
okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this preliminary list of?
Actually, I take that. Other than Park Drive, I have not been a part of accepting a street since I've been here.
We've done it 5 or 6 times. I mean, it's,
You have to go back and look at the old.
yeah.
I don't know if we needed to get a new layout prepared or.
No, I
So-
think you do it from the deed that the,
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we don't have to go get it surveyed, Paul, I don't believe. don't think we've ever
Again, I
done
just
that.
remember doing them in the 90s.
Yeah,
I mean,
we
you
did a
look
lot
at
of them some
Johnsville
years
Lane
ago.
and Williamsburg Drive, all those roads have been done.
But
since I've been here.
those were subdivisions, and so the developer had a set of plans that he brought in that you could reference when he did the acceptance. I'm gonna guess Park Drive, which was done in the 1920s, probably not some, and it's half in Springfield, half in Long Meadow. I'm gonna guess we don't really have a great set of plans for that. That's the key difference, is the age of the road. And, I mean, so, anyway, so yes, this, we just want to give you the heads up of what we'd be working on. You do have a bylaw, bylaw development policy.
Right.
So whatever we need to do in accordance with the policy to get these going, we'll submit draft, we have some drafts, like I said, we'll submit drafts as we get them for consideration for the warrant.
Okay. Marie?
Is the 51, Section 16A Airbnb?
That's an election
No.
registrar, excuse me.
That's the election registration
Oh,
stuff.
are we going to look to accept the bylaw, the
Yeah,
MGL from?
That's the short-term
Airbnb?
rental bylaw, that's what.
Yeah, but we have to accept, don't we have to accept the,
Statute?
there's a statute we have to accept, isn't
Yeah,
it?
to be able to have 4 registrars instead of 3.
No.
No.
She said accept the statute and then to have a bylaw for the short term.
Right, so I have the that's shorthand for getting putting together a proposal to tax short-term rentals.
Right, so we'll have to do an acceptance as well as the bylaw.
possible, yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
If there's anything that's not on here, you think of, let Paul and I know.
Nothing I can think of right now. So, all right, thank you. Thank you for putting that together, though, Stephen. I think it's important that we take a look at, kind of know where we're headed. I think that was really the last, yeah, that was the last item on our active agenda. There is a request for any discussion on subcommittee reports, and I don't know if any of the subcommittees have met.
I'd like
No.
to report now.
Nothing to report?
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me. So we have an executive session scheduled. It's an executive session for the purpose of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations, non-union personnel, with the possibility, I believe, to return into open session because we may vote on contracts. And so I need a motion.
It's just to discuss it.
Oh, we're just going to discuss it? We wouldn't vote on it?
You don't need to vote.
Oh, right, okay. Fine, so it would be an executive session to discuss that without returning into open session. So is there a motion to go into executive session? Okay, so that's a motion to go into executive session to discuss non-union contracts. So the motion's been made, is there a second?
Second. All right.
Motion made by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Lukese, and we need a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Okay, our next meeting, again, is right now scheduled for February 19th. Please watch the town website to see if that meeting is going to be canceled, but we will be here on February 25th for a review of the Long Meadow School Committee candidates. So with that, I thank everybody for their attendance tonight and wish them a good night.